introductions. I'll start with Juhi Gupta of Tetra Pak. Juhi is an esteemed leader in sustainability and corporate social responsibility. She's currently Director of Sustainability at Tetra Pak South Asia. In her role, she oversees the sustainable management of used cartons and also spearheads the nature-based agenda for Tetra Pak, along with directing social sustainability initiatives for the downstream industry. She has been in PepsiCo and Monsanto, and she's at the forefront of driving impactful initiatives to promote environmental stewardship and societal progress. Recognized as one of India's top 25 CSR and sustainability professionals by CSR Times. Through continuous innovation, Juhi leads efforts on developing the collection and recycling ecosystem for used cartons, along with working on sustainable packaging by design, ensuring that Tetra Pak remains at the lead of the sustainability pack in the packaging industry. So welcome, Juhi. Next up, I'll introduce Neha. Neha Jain is a dynamic tech entrepreneur, a former Google alumnus with over 15 years of industry experience. Her career path spans from journalism to Google, where her belief in technology's transformative power was honed. In 2012, she founded Fly By Night, which was India's first midnight delivery service in Mumbai. Zerocircle is her second entrepreneurial endeavor, stemming from her consultancy work on landfill and waste management. And through extensive research, she discovered seaweed's potential as a sustainable alternative. In 2020, driven by a desire to eliminate plastic from her home, Neha founded Zerocircle amid the pandemic, reflecting her commitment to reducing plastic consumption and addressing climate change. Collaborating with marine biologists, she envisions seaweed as the cornerstone of her mission and adopting ocean degradable solutions for sustainable packaging. So welcome, Neha. And then I'll move on to Richa. Richa Arora, our next speaker, brings more than 3 decades of experience and expertise spanning themes of governance in business to cultural transformation and innovations across value chains. In recognition of her achievements, she was on Business Today's list of most powerful women in 2020. Currently, Richa serves as an independent director on the boards of Relaxo Footwears, Graham Housing Finance, and Morphosis Venture Capital. She's also a member of the Governing Council of Mobile Creches, an NGO focused on early childhood development. Richa was earlier with the Tata Group, where as president of packaged foods within Tata Consumer Products, she was responsible for driving that business in India. She is currently an advisor and was previously the managing partner and CEO of ESG Stewardship and Services at ECube Investment Advisors. So welcome, Richa. All right, so I thought we'll kick things off to get the audience engaged with a Mentimeter poll. So if you all can go to menti.com, and we'll also have the information. So go to menti.com and use the code that's on your screen, 47144127. And let's have you all respond with the last thing that you ordered online, and we'll see whether or not we are able to generate a word cloud of some insights. And the reason I've put in ordered online is because I cannot remember the last time I went to a store to buy something. And I think with a lot of folks, it seems to be the default. Even groceries get delivered to the doorstep in the morning. So we have the poll that's running. So maybe give it food. All right. That's interesting. Clothes, milk, gifts. grocery, perfume. Coconut water online, that's cat food, milk. So food seems to be coming up. So it appears that food and clothes, and now grocery. Okay, I think we can. So the relative size of the words in the word cloud gives us the number of responses that that word has got relative to the other words. So food, grocery, clothes, and milk seem to be the ones that are the most, I guess, with the exception of food if it is produce, but even if it is produce, that's from online stores, there would be some kind of packaging around it. Everything would be packaged. So let's ask another question of you all. What did you do with this packaging that the food, clothes, groceries, and milk came in? So it's just click on the option. You either discarded it in mixed, which was dry and wet waste, or you discarded it in the dry waste bin. And I know that discarding it in a material specific bin is likely not even available in a lot of places at the residential RWA level or the society level. I know that's more the norm in maybe corporates. But we just wanted to see if there is, if that practice is there, because it does appear that segregation at the source would be one way to effectively have packaging find its way to recyclers. Okay, I think we have enough here. Let's see if there are any last minute kind of changes. All right, so 16% of our participants discarded it in the mixed, so 1 out of 6 in the mixed bin, or a little over 2 out of 3 in a dry waste bin. I'm surprised that we have 11% discarding it in a material specific bin. To me, that's very interesting. And I thought actually, I don't recall, would be higher. But I'm going to turn it to the panel. Maybe I'll ask Richa if you can go first. Any thoughts on this?
Hi, Aalok. Thanks. Pleasure to be here. And I think we've got a very evolved audience here. So you're finding this discarded and mixed quite low. But if you really look at overall and where I think everyone is moving in terms of recycling, there's a long way to go, because I think in India about 75 or 80% of the waste we generate is recyclable, but India recycles only about 30%. But so there is a problem, but it's a multi-stakeholder problem, and yes, more and more consumers, like the consumers on this the audience here, need to be educated on segregation, and municipalities need to have and implement the right waste disposal and recycling solutions. So I think the folks on this audience would be in the larger metros where some of these things have taken root for some amount of time, and therefore I think the segregation of dry and wet is certainly pretty much ingrained in most people. And the only thing I would say is that the needle has definitely moved, but it's an ongoing effort and part of the journey of sustainability. And there are many non-profits and for-profit organizations working with municipal bodies to make a more positive impact. So yeah, it's good to see this.
Okay. Neha, I'll go to you next because Juhi, I want to club your response with a response to a broader question. So maybe Neha, if you can react to this.
Thanks, Aalok. It's great to be here. I think the second or the third question that I probably would have expected out of the series of questions that you asked was, did you think that was a right bin after you put it in a dry bin, right? So if the largest portion of the audience right now is buying food, likely the food is also greasy, right? And even if it goes into a dry bin and if it's greasy, it's not going to get recycled. So, I mean, my thoughts are of little cynical because we understand that we're starting from segregation, but segregation as a user, as a consumer, I feel good that I have done my job. But what does not happen is how many people, when they buy chutney packaging or rather get chutney with the samosas that they buy, clean up the little pouch and put it in the bin, right? So a lot of the problem of recycling after we segregate also happen, and those are also something that consumers may be able to help with. But in most cases, it's not a consumer responsibility to that extent. So I think it ends at segregation, but there are several other problems of recycling that we yet to need to solve for.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Neha. So Juhi, over to you. And just as I kind of, let you respond and also react to what we've seen, a couple of data points that I want to add here is that almost 2 billion kilograms of plastic packaging waste is generated, largely due to e-commerce. But and it is only increasing. So I read somewhere that packaging is increasing at the rate of like 67% year on year or something to that effect, which is almost like a scary number. But and also, Richa, you mentioned 30% of recyclables get recycled, but globally, the estimate is that only 85% of only 15% of all packaging gets recycled. 85% goes in landfill. So considering this and the responses that we've seen, how are industries, including customers of Tetra Pak, addressing the post-disposal journey of quick consumption products like milk, food? And I mean, even as I ask this, I have got to say, right? I mean, to me, I've always been intrigued when I read that on Tetra Pak cartons, and Tetra Pak has almost become like the Xerox of the packaging industry, right? When it says that refrigerate after opening, which means that before you open it, it's going to stay good, right? Which is phenomenal. I mean, that's the value that a Tetra Pak carton brings to food in general as the value chain. So, but post-consumer, what are your customers doing and what is Tetra Pak doing to facilitate or even incentivize consumer participation to close the loop? How much maybe do you see of like, Tetra Pak cartons coming back to you, or do you track that? And is there also an opportunity to strengthen EPR regulations in the same breath? So first your reactions, and then maybe if you can speak to the broader question.
Sure. Thank you, Alok. Great to be here. And again, too many questions packed into one, but let me attempt in answering each one of them. First, my reaction to this poll is pleasantly surprising. I mean, to see that much level of segregation at source, we really do have an evolved audience here. But the reality is, really not so green. When you go out there in the landfills, when you go out there in the collection centers or segregation centers, the kind of waste that comes together, I mean, there is no value left. So idea is if the segregation at source is happening, it's no longer a waste, it's actually valuable. And this is one of the systemic challenges that we have, not just for India, but many developed countries as well, that there's no waste segregation happening. So while we talk about the industry participation and their role in the entire waste management scheme of things, as consumers, we also have a role to play in terms of segregating the waste. Even if it's dry and wet, I mean, this is still far removed, I would say, in a material specific bin. But even if dry and waste are separated and they are, taken forward also as such, because sometimes at a household level, segregation is happening. But when the waste worker comes and collects the waste, he again mixes it back. So this is not, the reality, definitely. Now, coming back to what we do in terms of collection, recycling, and what our customers do, let me start by talking about our packaging structure itself. So Tetra Pak is a three material, six layered structure. Primarily, it is paperboard. 70% of it is paperboard. 25% of it is polymer, and 5% is aluminium. You talked about no need for refrigeration. Our brand philosophy is that protect what's good. So whatever milk is there or juice is inside the carton, that needs to be protected along with protecting the environment. So we need to protect the environment by having the right packaging solution for the customers. So having said that, aseptic technology is something, again, very unique that Tetra Pak worked on almost many years back, and that allows for no requirement for refrigeration. It has, that is why low carbon emissions, no refrigeration required. It's lightweight, so loadability is high. In many of the LCA studies, Tetra Pak cartons or paper-based cartons have been found to have very less carbon emission in comparison to some of the other packaging materials that are available. So that's on the packaging side. And now getting specifically into collection recycling, let me start with what Tetra Pak does and also touching a little bit upon the EPR regulations that exist in the market today. So Tetra Pak has been working on collection recycling for many years. Globally, if you look at the global picture, we have about collection recycling operations in more than 70 countries. In last 10 to 12 years, we've actually increased our investments in collection recycling by 5 times. Now we have 200 recycling units globally, which are recycling Tetra Paks. Now, if I were to give more statistics, in 2022, 1.2 million cartons were collected and recycled globally. And we put in 30 million euros investment in 2022 on collection recycling. Going forward, the investments are increasing to 120 million euros. And again, if I were to zoom in on India itself, we started on this journey of collection recycling almost 2 decades back. We have been voluntarily working on this without even the EPR norms being there at that point in time. And we have worked with the entire value chain, right from the customers or consumers rather, to make them aware of importance of segregation. So we have many programs with NGOs, one of the program being Aalok A, which is with Sahas NGO, focusing in Gurgaon and Delhi on source segregation at source. It's a ward level intervention where we are trying to make the wards Atmanirbhar when it comes to collection and recycling. So right from the consumers in making them aware, to working with the waste collectors or the aggregator partners that we work with, helping them with the infrastructure, whether it is the baling, sorting requirement, collection centers, in fact, capacity building on better segregation practices, or even with recyclers. So we have worked in creating the entire value chain when it comes to collection recycling. Now, I also want to touch upon the two different ways, because there are many myths that are there around Tetra Pak being a multi-layered packaging, hence the recycling being very difficult. Let me just also touch upon two processes which are followed in terms of recycling of cartons. One is the paper mill route, where the cartons go into a paper mill, the pulp is separated, and there are many stationery items, books, notebooks, everything is made from that pulp. And the polyal, which remains, there are applications like pellets making, roofing sheets, which are made of polyal. Then there is a full carton recycling, which is done, where Deluxe is one of our big recyclers. They make the entire carton, they shred it, put it into hot plate, compress it, and make it into composite sheet, which can be converted into furnitures, benches, garden benches. So we have been working with a lot of municipalities to give out these sort of benches to them, so that there's more awareness of how waste can be channelized into something of value. So that's the collection recycling environment that we operate in with the EPR regulations in place now. I think more and more corporates are also coming into this, because it's not voluntary anymore, it's mandated. EPR regulations are very stringent. They require the PBOs, the producers, brand owners, importers, to collect back 100% of what they bring out or generate in the market through their sales of their products. So it's very strict. And again, there are recycling norms which set in from this year itself. For our category, it means 30% recycling of cartons, meaning that whatever you are collecting is not being sent to energy recovery, at least 30% is sent for recycling. From next year, recycled content norms are also coming in. So this space or the regulatory landscape is going to get more stringent. Hence, the corporates are, need to comply. So they are going to be having more investments into this space towards collection recycling.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Juhi. I'm going to move on to another poll. Actually, before I do that, I see that we have Dwepen who's on the call. I wanted to take the opportunity. Dwepen, are you able to unmute yourself? So Dwepen H is the Chief Operating Officer of Feedback Foundation. And they do a lot of work in the space of, oh yeah, there you are, in the space of waste management, along with municipalities. And since I have you on the call, Dwepen, I just wanted to maybe get your reaction to what you're seeing on the.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so it was very interesting, Alok, to look at the poll, and it was astonishing to me also because I've been working in 445 different urban local bodies pan India, and I will say the segregation is not a problem whenever there is a behavior change program running in those cities. Because there are evolved programs by Swachh Bharat Mission and 2.0, which has been launched just now, and also the impetus of Swachh Sarvekshan, which has happened. I think the behavior change program is pretty successful in source segregation kind of thing. The problem happens now. I say that is the demand side of any waste management. The supply side is after that, what happens? Does the collection, transportation people, they are collecting waste in the segregated manner? Does the MRF or the micro composting centers have the processing plants in such a way that they can process wet waste separately and dry waste separately? My answer is no. And that is where we are working with the government to strengthen the supply side. The demand side is already there. Are many people, there are many corporates who want to give a lot of fund. Like we have a lot of CSR funding for the behavior change programs, but they are not actually funding the second part of this entire program, which is the main part of it, the demand side. And we always say that government has to support it. Yes, government has to do that. There's a huge level of even the money which has been flown in to the government system is a lot, and they don't know what to do. I have seen that many sites they have 3 baler machines, but they are rusting. They have screening machines, but they're rusting. So the entire education has to be done at the ULB level, and that's what we are doing. And the data talks about that the packaging is such a thing that nothing. I will say that wherever we are working, it doesn't go in the landfill site. What is going in the landfill site is the small sachets, the shampoo packet, small little, which you cannot sort it out. And that goes as a RDF, which is refuse derived fuel. That's the problem in this entire system. Tetra Pak, where Juhi ma'am, we are working in multiple cities. Though Tetra Pak has been taken up by the aggregators, but as you said that there is a pulping system which happens, but major of the Tetra Pak is going to the landfill because of the separation issue, or else it's going to the energy plants. So we are seeing that it goes to the energy plant because it's a highly calorific value of the Tetra Pak is very high. So either you burn it, incinerate it to get converted to the fuels, or else you we find recyclers, but it's very difficult in this market, in this entire thing, to find this excellent packaging material is landing up. We are not able to find recyclers for this excellent packaging material. So Alok, these are the few data points what we have, and I think for the entire dry mixed waste, Tetra Pak is around what we get at our site is around 0.46%. So that percentage is very low, but that percentage is entirely going to the landfill side because of lack of recyclability. Or I will say not landfill side, we try to send it to a cement factory or incinerate it rather than going to landfill side. So that is how the current situation is.
Okay, thanks, Dwepen.
Can I respond? Sorry, Aalok.
Yeah, sure. You can respond. I guess, I mean, my takeaway from what Dwepen is saying is that at the MRF, there needs to be capability, and also the recycler capability, there is room for improvement.
Absolutely. I think there is also awareness because we are paying a subsidy to our aggregators for collection of used cartons. So there is value in it. And obviously, a recyclable material as ours, we would not want it to go for a landfill site or waste to energy recovery. So I would love to connect with the gentleman and also, take him through some of the recyclers that we have built over the years to be able to whatever they are collecting should actually go to the recycler. So happy to connect on the same.
Sure, great. All right, thanks, Dwepen. Let's move on to the next poll, and then we'll also go to questions after that. We are running a little behind time, but we'll try and catch up. So the next Menti poll, we should have that on your screen in a second. All right. So do you worry about sustainable packaging? I guess we figured it's good to ask the very basic question. Do you even think about it? Or are you completely oblivious to it? So I do think we have an evolved audience here. I think we need to have this audience educate all the people all over. Okay, I think, okay, we are seeing some last minute votes for this. All right, so I know of the broad challenges, but unsure what to do is 53%, and 37% say they care deeply about it. So let's see what the uncertainty and the deep care results in. So next question, if we can take a look at it. How much do you care about sustainable packaging is the next question. So do you choose products with sustainable packaging? Are you willing to pay more for it? Will you tolerate some inconvenience for it? Or is it all about functionality and price coming first? Okay. If anybody still has to cast their vote, now is the time. Otherwise, we'll get into the reactions to this. All right. So we did have a majority either caring, well, a smaller number caring deeply about sustainable packaging, and a majority saying they care, but they're not sure what to do about it. And here we have 46% of our respondents saying functionality and price comes first as it relates to sustainable packaging. So thoughts and reactions from around the room. Juhi, maybe I'll let you respond quickly to this. Is this surprising or is it?
No, this is not surprising. This is, I think, the true picture that functionality and price will always come first, despite, again, from the fact that some people would say that, they are okay to pay a premium. I would rather say there is a say-do gap there. There would be very limited, consumers who would be willing to pay more for a sustainable packaging. But I think going forward, at least customer or consumers are demanding more sustainability. I think that's a positive side of it. more innovations will come into play because of this demand which is coming from the ground. So yeah, no surprises here on the poll.
Okay, Richa, maybe I'll let you react to this.
So I would say the audience is very honest, and largely, given that they were very evolved when it came to segregation. And I think if you look at this across a not so evolved audience, you'll find even more startling things. I mean, forget about packaging for a while. I think there have been very large scale studies when you talk to consumers about what's their interest in sustainability or making lifestyle changes, such as, let's say carpooling, using public transport or driving electric vehicles. I think it's very high. If I recall, it's like upwards of 80-85%. But an equal number will say that they prioritize saving money, which is what the 46% people are calling out here. That in spread across the actual consumer base is possibly going to be much higher than this 46%, be close to, I think, 4/5 of the audience, I suspect, would be there. But I think what's also important to understand is why is this the case, especially, let's say, for this audience, which is interested in it, is aware about it, but is still going to, follow maybe a default option. I think the issue also lies in what kind of information is available for people to understand what is sustainable packaging. How does it link up to the environment? How does my action impact the environment, and where are these options available, and what do they do to me? So I think there's a whole lot of interrelated things here. I don't know whether that's the case with this audience, but if I'm just looking at purely as a layperson, and I look at when people talk about green, sustainable packaging, I don't know what it means. So that gap between intent and action needs to be bridged with more information and education, like we were talking in the context of even waste, for example, all the discussion which is happening and what Juhi was talking about, and then gentleman who you pulled in, that becomes a kind of a gap in this, and that's what I'm seeing reflected across, the first set of polls and this set of polls. And it also goes to what are the options available today. Aalok, going back to the data you quoted, you said 98%. You quote a very high 500 billion for investments which are going into sustainable packaging, but only 2% of the packaging used is non-fossil fuel based. And I think that there are real issues there in the development of this packaging material, because if you go back to first principles, what do you need packaging for? I mean, if you could ask that question and say, what do you need packaging for? And you need packaging for, if you're a food product, and many people, what they buy online especially is food. You need certain barrier properties for food. You need it not to kind of go bad after a point in time. You also need packaging material for ensuring safety of the product and transportation, ensuring shelf life. So you cannot, you have to address all these aspects, branding. I think all this is important, not just for food. This is, across the entire consumer goods space. And so if you do not have the properties which are required for that particular product category, whether it's barrier properties, shelf life, storage, travel, all those aspects, you have to balance that out with the environment friendly aspect. So how do you arrive at a packaging material which does all this and is environment friendly? So till you crack that code in a cost efficient manner, because it's got to be scalable. You can't, doing it for 1% or 2% of the population or products is not going to have the impact which I think all of us envisage when we kind of talk about this. So I think there are real issues. There's a lot of R&D happening, but some people are also, I think, to your point of being provocative, I think there are a lot of large organizations working behind closed doors and not actually working in a more open source, if I may say, Maybe some solution will emerge, maybe 4-5 solutions will emerge as a result of this, but maybe a solution will emerge faster if that were to happen. And certainly from what one hears, there's a lot of closed door work, R&D work happening, but no solution in sight yet for the last so many years.
Okay, and I think that's a great segue into going on to Neha, who is a creator of a material from seaweed, plastics from seaweed. I'll let you, Neha, react to the results. Did you find it surprising? Is it in line with what you saw? But also, as you speak about it, I think, you know, from Richa's experience in the space, consumer packaged goods, FMCG, to you know, the read by and large is that there isn't, or there aren't good enough solutions in terms of price and fit. And I mean, that's also related to the, you know, to the question about like, how do we kind of even differentiate between sustainable packaging and unsustainable packaging? But that's a different question. So maybe if we have time, we can come to that. You know, should there be norms that, you know, unsustainable packaging should necessarily like be red colored or something like that? I don't know. But maybe just, you know, so plastics from seaweed is really cool. It's I'm, you know, it's end of life. Is it biodegradable or compostable? You know, does it just naturally kind of, you know, degrade? And then the other concern that I also actually have is, you know, does this seaweed need to be harvested? Is it, you know, specially grown? You know, does that come with a footprint of its own that we're not? I mean, these are just thoughts that come to my mind. So maybe if you can talk a little bit first, react to what you saw on the poll, and then you know, some of the comments from Richa, as well as, you know, some of these broader comments around your innovation, or in general biogenic innovations. Are there unintended consequences? You know, because the road to hell is paved with unintended consequences. So yeah, so maybe if you can just talk to that.
So I think based on the polls, I was happily surprised because I think most people looked at 46%. I was looking at the 55% who are willing to change. And we have to admit, India is a fairly price-sensitive market. Take 4 years ago, that's not too far long back. That number, 55%, would have been much lower. So while, you know, you see, you know, a better outcome 5 years later, or 4 years later, another way to maybe split this data is break that down in demographics, right? You'd notice that people are willing to pay for packaging, sustainable packaging, and we'll discuss what sustainable packaging is for different people. But if you split that data by age groups, you will see a mind shift. People are demanding for packaging. As you see transition from people using skincare products which are friendly to their skins or chemical free or less harsh, they're also expecting packaging to be friendly to the market, right? So a person who's looking to buy friendlier products for their health and well-being, they're also conscious of the packaging, and they're also conscious of the environment. However, I mean, I don't want to sort of get into that train of thought, but I'm happily surprised to see this audience. You know, at least there is 55% of a sample set from India, if I may call that as the major audience at this point, favoring sustainable packaging, or at least inkling towards that. So that's a push that I see in the good direction. The second thing that you mentioned was what is sustainable packaging, or and you know, when this packaging becomes a norm, what are the unintended consequences of it? I think almost every single thing that you do will have unintended consequences. So I think let's admit that, right? There is no one silver bullet. So sustainable packaging, when you look at it, a lot of people look at it in terms of LCA. So you say it's petrol-based or non-petrol-based, right? That's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it, because you're just looking at the mitigation of the emissions that happened because it was petroleum. The other emissions that you would look at, or the impact that you would look at, is land, water, and fertilizers. When you're growing something, it will have an impact, right? So you move away from petroleum, and now you're growing something out of corn, or making something out of corn. Corn is not coming from nowhere, right? It doesn't rain corns. So you got to harvest it, and it requires a huge amount of time, energy, and fertilizers. So there are, even when we look at solutions, we need to look at it as an overall picture, not just LCAs or, and then comes the end of life. You asked me, is this material biodegradable or home compostable, right? Or whatever kind of compostable. There are so many jargons that are thrown around. And consumers, honestly, I kind of feel bad for them because I've come from that place. What do you mean by compostable? What do you mean by biodegradable? You go to the supermarket, it's a nightmare. I mean, if I want to buy just rice, looking at several labels of rice, how do I even make an informed decision? So there have to be third party, unbiased bodies who actually make these rules, and they're called your policymakers, right? So, working with the industry, making the choice easier for customers and consumers, I think is one way I would sort of respond to that. But coming to, let's say, seaweed and, how do we design, or, the entire community that I probably represent, I'll speak for them as well. When you look at end of life, you're looking at end of life, that this is biodegradable, repulpable, separable in different ways. And biodegradability is a extremely large sort of universe you're playing with. You're talking about thousands of years. If we waited for thousands of years, the landfill, what could happen to it. And it will have other impacts. The other part about compostability or recyclability is certain materials are recyclable, but they're very difficult to recycle, and hence they end up in recycling lines. In landfills. And the reason for that is when you're buying a material, I'm not even talking about long shelf life products. I'm talking about short shelf life products. I think Varpan, who was just speaking shortly, he said these sachets, they seem to persist. And they have such low utility and such short shelf life. And much worse is short shelf life products that you get in delivery, which is your deliveries when you're ordering for food. Sometimes you need it, sometimes on a whim, right? And the amount of packaging that adds up. Most people have moved to paper packaging. Is that sustainable or not sustainable? But paper is lined with plastic, right? Is that separable? Maybe it is. Is it recoverable? Yes. But will it get recovered? So these are things that are difficult. So you need to look at the entirety of it, because it's very easy to say this is not done, that is not done, and everything has its own challenges. So I think that's an important thing to understand. Coming to seaweed and its impact on the environment. So seaweed is a material that is farmed. It doesn't come from wild harvesting, which means there are dedicated farms that are growing this. If you were to look at the unintended impact of it, right? So why seaweed seems to solve a lot of the problems? Because it does not require land, water, and energy to grow. It grows within a month's time. So even if you're looking at a source that can grow something or produce something, it can come up at a very fast pace. Another is it does not require fertilizer. So any agricultural products or bio-based material will have fertilizers thrown into it. Fertilizers are horrible for, because it goes into your groundwater, leaches. There are another set of health problems that will create, right? So you don't want a single-use plastic to have that. So the reason why seaweed works, yes, it captures carbon really fast. It captures carbon 5 to 25 times faster than anything that grows on land. So it's a good resource to go after, but also because when you grow it, it improves the quality of the ocean. Our oceans are warming up. The reason why you're going away from petroleum is because it's heating up the entire world. But if you're growing seaweed, you're capturing carbon really fast and you're cooling the oceans, and oceans are really the temperature controller of the world. So you're solving for a lot of problems by choosing the right resource. What you do with the resource is secondary, right? You can choose to make biofuels out of it. You can choose to make paper out of it. You can choose to make sustainable packaging or thin films out of it. So that's another way to look at it. And I'm just going to keep it short because I'm fairly aware of the time right now, is when you're looking at thin films, right? So now thin films, what is the end of life for a thin film? Thin film will end up in the dry bin, right? And for reasons, because they are, mixed layers sometimes, or even single layers, monolayer sachets don't get recycled. And there are a number of reasons for that, and I won't get into that. So the idea for biomaterials company is, how do you design a system which is human proof, which is what I call accident proof. If it ends up in any mismanaged environment, can it break down? So let's design materials like that, because of the price and the sensitivities around that, most materials are probably not going to make it to its way to a recycling centers. right? I understand the intent and the work that a lot of industry people are doing, and for the right reasons. But it will end up in water, in marine environment. We always talk about land degradation, soil degradation. Not a lot of people talk about marine degradation, because our oceans are filled with it, right? Like, I know gory stories, but everyone knows that. So once it enters your water streams, water is going to touch every life, because it touches every continent, most countries in the world, right? So once it goes into that, then it's a bigger problem. So while soil is a problem because we live on it, so we have to co-share the space with the life around us as well. So I think that's my inputs on that.
So just a follow-on question, Neha, just speaking to like maybe a little bit on the functionality and price of what you're doing.
Sure. So there's good news, and there is space to be worked on. So we realized when we were working with materials, right? A lot of the people are right now moving away from plastics to paper, but paper does not have a barrier. So as we were building our thin films, which were single-use systems and standalone systems on their own, we realized that paper will need the barrier, because the most part of the world is actually moving to paper-based packaging. So how do we add functionality to paper? And we've developed the coating, and that coating is actually in many cases you're always comparing yourselves with bio-based systems. With our coatings, you can actually compare it with chemical coatings that are rampantly used in the market, with that as 1-to-1. So in terms of functionality, we use the strengths of seaweed. So the barrier that we would give to the paper is coming from its strength, right? So it is replacing it from a performance point of view and competing on price as well. And not just for markets that are willing to pay for it, it's also for the markets that are not willing to pay for it. So it's price competent as well.
Okay, Richa, I'm going to just turn to you from your past experience as leader for packaged goods at Tata Consumer Products. If there were this material that Neha has that is competitive both in terms of functionality and price, how difficult is it to switch it out?
See,
what are
there's
some of the barriers, and what is needed to enable this?
See, any new packaging material, there's of course a transition which happens. First, you got to see whether it's she's talking about this paper with the lining. Is that going to interact with the food, the spices, the salt? Whether it's going to work at all for food, I can't gauge from what Neha has just described. I'd be just curious, and I'll link up with Neha separately to understand that.
It can, but just answering that.
Yeah. But I think it becomes an aspect of scalability, commercial viability, and I'm just taken back in time to as Juhi was also talking about before all this EPR and all came in. We were looking at a recyclable pack for Tata Salt way back almost 10 years ago. I mean, there was no regulation, EPR was not even there on the horizon, but just as the whole ethos of the group to do things which are good for people, planet, profits was really where the intent of the recyclable pack was coming from. And I think the whole this whole business about how do you kind of make it commercially viable? How do you create an ecosystem of suppliers who will provide that material to you on a large scale? So what happened was that there were both, of course, internal and external challenges, but the biggest challenge was not our own will or intent, but the lack of a vendor base for using that particular polymer that was required to create the laminates, because there were not enough other organizations which had that recyclable packaging material on their agenda. So, the material which Neha has today, how many companies will it work for? How can you create an ecosystem around it? That would be the question. So we would keep getting a pushback from the vendor till we managed to push back, because by then we were hitting a scale of almost 1 billion packs of Tata Salt in a financial year. But internally also, I think there are many things which need to be fixed. And here we did manage to, for the recyclable pack, we did manage to do that. But every functional team had an issue. My production team said that the process loss during packing operations would be high. So when the laminates are fed into the packing machine, the material wasted would be much more. Now, when you're talking about something like that, was just a kind of the same, I would say, the thickness of material. And so we could use our existing packing machines to do something like that. But if you talk about a material which Neha just spoke about, you will require possibly a change of machinery. And you will, would you do that at a point in time? Would you do that over a period of time? Stagger it? So all those are issues which will come. So, the production team would talk about the process loss, and the procurement team would talk about the cost of material being high, and the fact that they won't be able to meet their targets. The marketing team said, oh, this doesn't look, as attractive enough. And the sales team said, there are going to be damages in the market and we're going to get a lot of returns and, write-offs. So I think the simple thing to do in these cases, which is what we did, is to do a kind of a limited scale pilot, in the sense that, you kind of do the packing, put it in a sales beat and see what happens. And when we did that, we did, of course, started with production and found that process loss was 10x higher. And this, as I said, was for material which, felt and didn't look very different from existing material. Something like the material which we are talking about now would be very, very different. And the cost was about 30% higher, which for a product which is sold for about 17 rupees back then is not something which is viable, right? So I remember putting a dedicated team of 2 production executives to address this process loss issue. And within 2 months and many machine trials later, it was actually under control. And the procurement cost, I think the cost goes away with as you scale. So it's really about getting a large number of participants to have for a material which works across a whole lot of industries. So I think you do need an external ecosystem which supports it, both in terms of organizations for whom and brands for whom this packaging material would be viable, and vendors who are willing to work with a new material. So really, even when the solutions may have a limited impact. For example, when you talk about a recyclable pack and all the things we've heard about and which we know about as to what happens in real life in terms of waste segregation, but at least I think it's good to have these new approaches and innovations. So at least we will arrive at a solution which is scalable in a shorter period of time. So culturally also, organizations, are they ready? I mean, even within the Tata system and Tata Chem, for the last 25 years, they've been reusing secondary bags in which Tata Salt was packed. And even there were all these questions which, people had. So it's a challenge. But I think the key things are scalability, and which will give you cost efficiency, and cultural, addressing the cultural dynamics within the organization.
All right. Thanks, Richa. I know we're almost at the top of the hour. Do we have a little bit of room with the 3 of you, or should we get into concluding? We do have a couple of questions. I think one of it, Neha, you already addressed about the thin films. But there's also a question on bioadditives which can be mixed. But before we go into that, do we have the room to go over a couple of minutes?
I'm good for the next 10 minutes, Aalok.
Okay.
Yeah, same. Aalok, 10 minutes.
Okay. All right. So, so critical aspect of your innovation is thin film plastics, which are a known health hazard. Talk to us about the health impacts of this. Are microplastics a concern with biogenic plastics, or does it not matter because it's all natural?
Yeah, I think fairly easy answer here. So this is, our materials are biodigestible, which means it will not break down into microplastics in land, water, and even your belly. When it passes through your belly, it passes as food. But we don't call our packaging edible, because edible is a gimmicky version. So to be scientifically accurate, it's a biodigestible material. We don't recommend that you start eating our packaging, because packaging needs to serve its use. So same way you would probably not eat leaf. I think that's how I would say how safe the material is. But just to sort of answer to Richa's point, I think she's spot on with vendors. There are two kind of gaps that we typically see. One is there's a materials company that's developing a product, and there is a brand that wants to use the packaging, and then there is a vendor in between. So while once a biomaterials company scales up their technology, it's important to also scale up the technology the vendor will use and make it a drop-in solution. So I can't agree with Richa more, because 2 years ago we had the solutions. The last 2 years we made it a drop-in. So for it to enter the world, it needs to become vendor friendly. It needs to become machine friendly. It needs to retrofit into existing lines, because your throughputs matter to your vendors, because brands don't make the packaging. It's the vendors that will make the packaging. So that's another thing. Second question that you asked was on the bio additives. Can be mixed with conventional plastics? The answer is yes and no, because conventional plastics are of different kinds. So some of them are compatible and some of them are non-compatible. Our materials on their own will break down in weeks, not months, not years, depending on the thickness again. So it can take anywhere between 4 to 8 weeks for it to break down as a standalone material. There are a lot of collaborations that we're doing, which are, of course, behind doors with large companies, where we're trying to make other materials degrade faster with our material, so that it follows the norms, and microplastics don't sort of enter any kind of mismanaged environment.
And
So,
Juhi, anything from your end on bioadditives in terms of like work that Tetra Pak may be doing?
Yeah, look, actually, we are also looking at a couple of options, but like Richa mentioned, scalability, needs to be there. Now, there are many things which are there out in the market called biodegradable, but then do they really biodegrade in the environment? That is to be seen. We have been in touch with many vendors around this who develop technologies, but when we get to questioning them on what about if it's shelf life, they are saying it's 2 years. What happens if it goes to marine? Before that time, before that period, what happens, how does it work with the soil, what are the impacts with the soil? So there are no clear answers there. So biodegradability is something that people want, but it's tread with caution, because many players are there. Again, in terms of straws, while SUP had banned plastic straws, we got into multiple options like compostable straws today, which needs industrial composting. And again, we were also looking at biodegradable options. So I would love to get in touch with Neha to really understand on the scalability part. Can we have something there? Can we do a pilot of sorts, or would it even fit with our the proposition that we have in terms of our product offerings? Would love to understand, because there's too much of seaweed required. Would you have such seaweed? I mean, how much would you have? And so those questions came to my mind when Neha started speaking. So probably I can connect with her offline to really understand what can be done there.
And Aalok, just to add, I'm not even sure biodegradable. There's a lot of issues around biodegradability itself. That is it really good for the environment, because you're making the particles finer and ultimately they're still there. So the jury is still out. Like the jury actually is also still out on, if you do a full value chain analysis of what it takes to get to a paper product versus what it takes to different types of plastics. And I'm sure the technical people will talk more about the HDPE and the various it's very different. You'll come to very different conclusions. You will find that in all cases, paper may not always be the best for the environment. So I think this is a whole, the whole packaging space is like a topic in itself. And there are so many unknowns within that, because I'm not so sure about biodegradables. That was a limited point I was trying to make, actually.
All right. Yeah, no. One of the conclusions that I was coming to was that while there is definitely room for, and we need to get to better materials, and I do think that whether it's energy or whether it's packaging, material science needs to be at the forefront of how we go through the next 3, 4, 5 decades or so. But I think that the big opportunity in this space, in my mind, really is that we need to close the loops in terms of, nothing going to landfill if we can do anything about it. I feel like that is probably what we need to get really good at. But I mean, to the extent that we can have better materials that are available at scale and, in like, so that they can just be dropped in, more power to you all, if that can happen, right? So we do have a few more questions, but we also have only 4 minutes to going 10 minutes over. So I'm going to leave it. I have one question that I don't see only as relevant to Juhi, even though it is addressed to Juhi. So I'm going to ask that question to all of you. I touched upon it briefly, but also that along with like any parting comments, what is the outstanding kind of innovation or opportunity that you see? So my question that I have open to all of you is, are there ways for customers to differentiate between sustainable food packaging and conventional packaging? Today, I mean, I know that there's some marking on some packaging that kind of says, I don't know, forest certified or like, but right now, even if I were in the market for products that are sustainably packaged, I don't know that I have a way to say that it is sustainably packaged. But, so that and then your concluding remarks. So maybe Juhi, you want to start? Or?
Sure, I can start. So I would say that there are many, many parameters to make, packaging sustainable. It would have a different uh, perspective for everyone to say that this packaging is sustainable. For example, some would say that you are having renewable resources or responsibly sourced raw materials. So that is why my packaging is sustainable. Some would say mine is more recyclable by design, and that's why it's sustainable. So there are, I think, many different parameters. Some would also say that circularity, when you are trying to have, for example, we are also working on recycled resins back in our packaging. So since we are trying to create a circular loop, so my packaging is sustainable. So I think it would mean different things to different people. So, but a packaging should be, again, I would say that from a consumer perspective, it should provide for that functionality. It should be cost effective. And again, from a collection recycling standpoint, it should be put in the right bin, at least from a wet waste to dry waste segregation. That should happen. Then I think, we can have more efficient waste management systems than anything. Now, I mean, if I were to also say what is my takeaway, I would say that every stakeholder in the industry or the value chain has a role to play. Consumer has their role to play in terms of segregation. Industry has a role to play in terms of bringing in more innovations, better innovations, investments, and also knowledge transfer, information. So I think when everyone starts playing their role, government has a role in terms of bringing in the right legislations, right rules. So when everyone plays a role, we can move on to better pastures or greener pastures, I would say. So partnership is the key for me, and forging into new partnerships, new ideas, new innovations. So today, for example, Neha, I would love to connect with her and understand how her technology works and, where she's sourcing from, how we can sort of integrate. So that partnerships, I think, is one of the key areas that we should focus
on. Okay. Thanks, Juhi. Neha, do you want to go next?
Sure. So I think the absolute definition, how we define what plastic is, because fundamentally we try to solve for the waste, right, in terms of materials, and we also say that if it's non-petro. But there are so many murky things that happen when you say biodegradable. You don't even know what that means, right? And then a byproduct of biodegradable came compostable. But what does that mean? Because compostability, even home compostability, allows you to do anything with that 10%. Right, 90% is the biodegradation that's required, and then you can, for all you know, they would have resins in that, right? So if it is directly going to the soil, it's badly made, so it's bad chemistry while you're trying to mask it as biodegradable chemistry, right? So I think that's one of the things. One important change that happened, I mean, it's probably something that I would wish India could adopt. Is an SUPD, which was a single-use plastics directive that came in Europe, that defined defined plastic itself. Because we say it's plastic-free. In most cases, when we say plastics-free, we only say it's polyethylene-free. And there are so many kinds of plastics, right, that exist. Another is when you take a biomaterial, you can take sugarcane and you can make PET bottle out of it. its end of life still remains the same, right? So if you're going to define plastics, you need to define exactly what you mean by plastic. And they've done a very good job in defining the plastic. So while you have degradation-based ASTM standards and various of those, and they're getting a little more accurate in terms of how people are designing their chemistry. The other one is the change which was done in 2022 that said that any naturally occurring polymer, and sorry for throwing a jargon in this audience, but it basically means that it's a naturally occurring compound. If it remains in the chemistry of in your product, then it's not going to be called plastic, and only then can you use the claim of plastic free. Right. So when you look at packaging, you need to look at it in terms of entirety. LCA is one way to look at it. Recycling is one way to look at it. But, it's not a unifaceted problem. It is a multifaceted problem, and regulatory wise also it needs to solve for. And my takeaway would be that, may seem like a mutual admiration club here, but collaborations are very important because, Richa and Juhi were talking about brands need to work with material companies, but there is an absolute leverage that brands have that none of the people in the value chain have. And that is, they're at the absolute B2B end of the entire value chain. So if you want to enable something, people will listen to you because you're the final client to the packaging industry or to the petroleum industry, right? So when brands use their leverage, they can actually work with their vendors, because when they make that change, they're making a change for a 2,000-ton line per month, or, depending on their capacities, right? And that makes a big difference, because if you start helping the vendors, because vendors are not going to not change. They will change if the brands give them the promise that I'm willing to pick this up from you, right? I will require this change. And we've seen that change happen even in India. So I know we have a long way to go with people in the ecosystem, but I think it's the collaboration that can take us far. I mean, you can't exist as a lonely whale.
All right. Richa, concluding remarks?
No, so I think Neha set the thing very nicely for the one thought which I wanted to share and then I'll come to the whole definition of plastics. You see, the corporates play a disproportionate role in terms of driving this agenda. And one of the things I think organizations need to keep track of is, of course, what percentage of their packaging is recyclable, which is the current situation. But with an eye to the future, what percentage of the R&D budget have they kept aside for green R&D solution? Because that's really going to determine what you're going to do in the future. So all these experimentations and all these trials and with materials and machines cannot happen if you don't have a budget for it. So if there's one metric which I would like to see organizations track, it is percentage of R&D expenditure going into green. That's it. That's the only thing I would ask for. Now, coming to the definition of sustainable packaging. So, there is a green taxonomy which is evolving for, what is the right emission for each industry, because you can't have a one size fits all. The EU has done a great job of defining that if you say that I'm a green fuel, then this is the level of carbon per kilometer which you can emit to classify as a green fuel. So I think when it comes to packaging, which is far more complex, ultimately it will have to be a taxonomy, which will then say that these are the 3 characters, or these are the 10 characteristics which make a product green, or these type of products can be classified as green, and these are definitely not green. So the only way out is a green taxonomy. We are right now putting E and S, for environmental and social factors. We are kind of starting that work. So this will have to be a part of that agenda of having a green taxonomy. And we can take learnings from the EU and UK, who are kind of putting this out, having started their journey much earlier. So a lot to learn from there, and some things you can shift and kind of get here. Some things you'll have to evolve, but it can be done. And yeah.
Right. Cool. Thank you so much.
Regulators, companies, consumers.
Yep. All right. I think we are 15 minutes over, so I should conclude. Thank you all very much for the questions continue to come in, but I think maybe we'll take this onto the LinkedIn Live post that is there. But yes, I mean, to me, partnerships, we need to do this all together. The need for a green taxonomy seems like the takeaway for this. Thank you all so much for your time, and thanks to the audience for a very engaging, a lot of questions, some technical questions, some business model related questions as well. But thank you for staying with us for an hour 15, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you all.
Thank you, Alok. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.